Welcome to the deep dive. We're taking a rather curious journey, down a rabbit hole, if you will, into what it really means to understand books.
And our guide for this particular deep dive is none other than Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
Exactly. It seems like just a kid's story, right? Fantastical, maybe a bit nonsensical, but it's so much more.
Oh, absolutely. It's actually a brilliant exploration of how we relate to written knowledge itself. It's almost a book about books, or at least about reading them.
So our mission today, we're going to explore how this story, from Alice's very first comments right through to the end, really unpacks our relationship with texts.
That's the plan. We'll look at how it deals with expectations, logic, meaning, all through Alice's experiences. And we really want you, our listener, to think about your own reading. What do you expect from a book? How does it shape how you think?
Let's start right at the beginning, chapter 1. Alice is bored, sitting by her sister, who's reading. Alice glances over and has this immediate thought.
Yeah, the famous line, what is the use of a book without pictures or conversation?
It's so simple, but really profound, isn't it?
It cuts right to the heart of it. What do we want from a book? Alice, in that moment, wants engagement. Pictures, that's direct visual input, right? Bypasses the work of decoding text.
And conversation, that implies interaction, back and forth.
Exactly, it sets up this contrast right away. Passive reading versus an active, lively experience. She's not wrong, is she? Even now, we look for that.
We do. We want graphics and reports, maybe, or we listen to podcasts like this one, hoping for a sense of dialogue of connection, not just dry facts.
We crave that interaction. Alice just puts it very plainly. She's asking about the utility of a book beyond just words on paper.
Okay, so Alice has these initial expectations, then she falls.
And falls and falls.
Right. And down in the rabbit hole, amidst all the weirdness, there's this tiny moment of normalcy. She sees cupboards and bookshelves lining the well as she floats down.
It's fascinating, that detail, because in chaos, what do? We often grasp for the familiar, for structure, for rules. And books, well, they represent that, don't they? Order, knowledge.
Yeah, like a little anchor. And later, she explicitly wishes for rules when she's shrinking and growing uncontrollably.
She does. She wonders if there's a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes.
Which is absurd, obviously, but it shows that deep-seated desire. We want instructions, a manual for life, especially when things go haywire. We expect books to provide that predictability.
We look to them for control, or at least the illusion of it.
So the external world's logic, the kind found on bookshelves, is already failing her. But what about the stuff she's learned? The things she knows by heart from her lessons?
Ah, yes. Wonderland takes a hammer to that, too. She tries to recite her multiplication tables.
And gets 4 times 5 is 12 and 4 times 6 is 13.
Total nonsense. Or her geography, London is the capital of Paris.
It's not just that she's confused, is it? It's like the fundamental building blocks of her education are crumbling.
Precisely. It raises a really interesting question. How useful is knowledge if it's just rote memorization? If you can't apply it or adapt it when the context changes radically?
Right, and she even doubts herself. Thinks maybe she's turned into her friend Mabel, who she assumes wouldn't know these things.
Exactly. I must have been changed for Mabel. It shows that disconnect. If the facts don't work, maybe she's the problem. It suggests that learning without understanding, without critical thinking, is fragile. It's like having a map for the wrong territory.
And it's not just school lessons. Even nursery rhymes, things seemingly set in stone, get warped.
Oh, the parodies are brilliant. How doth the little busy bee become?
How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail? Completely changes the meaning, the moral.
And you are old, Father William. The original Southey poem is this sort of pious dialogue about respecting age. Carroll's version is just bizarre, standing on heads, balancing eels.
So that's the point of these parodies, do you think?
Well, Carroll is messing with our assumptions about fixed texts. It challenges how well we really know the original if it can be twisted so easily, and it highlights how unreliable our memory can be.
Like when the caterpillar just shuts her down after the crocodile poem, it is wrong from beginning to end.
Exactly. How much do we truly process what we read versus just storing it, maybe imperfectly? These familiar rhymes become unstable, fluid. It suggests knowledge isn't as concrete as we might think.
That idea of instability, of meaning being slippery, continues, doesn't it? Like with the mouse's tail.
Ah, the long and a sad tail, which Alice literally sees as a long tail.
Because of how the poem is printed on the page?
Yes.
In that wiggly shape getting narrower.
It's such a clever bit of meta-commentary.
Oh.
Carroll is playing with the form of the book itself. The way the text looks directly changes how Alice understands the content. Is the story sad, or is the pun on tail the point?
It makes you think about how much presentation affects interpretation. Layout, design, even today.
Absolutely. Authors or designers guide us in subtle ways. Carroll was doing it with typography back then. It forces us to see the book as a whole object, not just words.
And then there's the ultimate challenge to finding meaning. The Mad Tea Party.
And the Hatter's Riddle. Why is a raven like a writing desk?
The riddle with no answer. Alice gets so frustrated. She wants sense, closure.
Riddles that have no answers. Her frustration is the reader's frustration sometimes. We often expect texts, especially narrative ones, to provide neat solutions, clear meanings.
But Carroll seems to be saying, sometimes that's not the point.
Exactly. Sometimes the goal isn't a logical answer. It might be to provoke thought, or just to revel in absurdity, or to challenge our need for everything to mean something specific. Understanding a book isn't always about finding the answer. Sometimes it's about appreciating the question, or the deliberate lack of an answer.
It's about the experience, maybe, not just the destination.
Well put. It pushes back against our desire to neatly categorize and explain everything.
And speaking of imposing meaning where there might be none, enter the Duchess.
Oh, the Duchess.
Sure.
Relentlessly finding a moral in everything.
Even when it makes absolutely no sense. Like the moral about flamingos and mustard both biting.
And the moral of that is birds of a feather flock together, which is just wrong.
Alice points it out. Only mustard isn't a bird.
But the Duchess just plows on. It shows that human tendency, doesn't it? To force a lesson, to find meaning, even if we have to twist logic into knots to get there.
Like her final, incredibly convoluted moral. Be what you would seem to be, which just spirals into incomprehensibility.
It's almost a parody of moralizing itself. And it makes us ask, how often do we as readers do that? Try to extract one single moral of the story from something complex, maybe ignoring the nuances or the contradictions.
We want that neat takeaway message.
We do, and the Duchess is like the embodiment of that tendency taken to an extreme. It's a warning against oversimplifying, against demanding simple lessons from a complex world or a complex text.
Okay, so meaning is slippery, maybe even imposed. What about rules? Authority? Wonderland has plenty to say about that too.
Definitely. Look at the Queen of Hearts. Her go-to solution for everything.
Off with their heads. Instant, arbitrary, no due process.
Exactly. And the king, during the trial, suddenly invents Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court.
Right, just because Alice is growing taller, and when she questions it...
He insists it's the oldest rule in the book, even though he just made it up.
It's hilarious, but also a bit pointed.
Very pointed. Carroll is satirizing how easily authority, rules, laws can be arbitrary, self-serving, or just plain illogical, yet presented as absolute. It makes you think about the texts we encounter that claim authority, legal documents, scientific papers, news reports.
We need to ask, who wrote this? Why? What's their agenda?
Precisely. We can't just accept the rules written down. We have to look at the source, the context, the legitimacy. The king, invoking the oldest rule, is a classic tactic using tradition or the appearance of it to shut down dissent. It's a call for critical reading of any authoritative text.
That leads perfectly into the trial of the Knave of Hearts. The evidence is, well, it's just some verses.
Utterly nonsensical verses, and Alice immediately says, I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it.
She's the voice of reason, again. But the king, he needs it to mean something. He needs it to prove the knave is guilty.
So he starts trying to interpret it, twisting words, looking for puns, like the bit about the words not fitting the knave. It's a desperate attempt to impose meaning to fit his desired outcome.
While the jury is just scribbling nonsense like stupid things.
It's a brilliant commentary on interpretation, isn't it? Is meaning in the text waiting to be found? Or do we bring meaning to it based on our biases, our needs, our agendas?
Like the king wanting guilt, so he reads guilt into the verses.
Exactly. And Alice, wanting logic, sees only nonsense. The jury, just following orders, writes down whatever seems required. It shows how subjective the act of reading and interpreting can be. Different readers, different goals, different understandings, or misunderstandings.
And the poor lizard, Bill, getting an inkstand thrown at him just for trying to use the king's logic.
It shows the frustration when interpretations clash, and how power often resorts to silencing opposing views rather than engaging with them. It really forces you to think. When I read something, am I understanding it on its own terms, or am I just confirming what I already believe?
All this builds up the nonsense, the arbitrary rules, the forced meanings, until Alice finally snaps.
The big moment. She's growing, physically and metaphorically gaining confidence.
And she just shouts it out. Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards.
That's the climax. She rejects the entire premise, the entire imposed reality of Wonderland. She sees through the flimsy authority.
It feels like the reader finally taking control.
That's a great way to put it. Alice, as the reader or experiencer of this world, asserts her own agency. She refuses to be bound by the nonsensical rules or the pronouncements of these paper-thin authorities. It's a moment of liberation.
So for us as readers, that means?
It means that true understanding sometimes involves recognizing the limitations or even the falsehoods within a text. It means having the courage to question, to disagree, to assert your own judgment against the perceived authority of the author or the narrative. Don't just passively accept. Engage, challenge, think for yourself, just like Alice does.
And right after she says that, the whole thing collapses. The cards fly up.
And she wakes up, back of the riverbank, head in her sister's lap. It was all a curious dream.
Which reframes the whole experience, doesn't it? The entire book of her adventures was internal, a creation of her own mind.
It does. And it suggests something profound about reading itself. Books aren't just external objects containing facts. They are invitations to imaginative journeys, experiences that happen within us. Reading is an act of creation.
How so?
Well, think about it. Carroll provides the words, but you, the reader, build the world. You visualize the Mad Tea Party. You feel Alice's confusion. You imagine the Queen's fury. Your mind actively constructs the reality of the story based on the textual prompts. We are co-creators with the author.
That makes sense. The story comes alive in our heads.
Exactly. And that active participation is why stories stick with us, why they feel real even when they're fantastical. It's the power of imagination sparked by the text.
But the story doesn't quite end when Alice wakes up. It carries over to her sister.
Right. Her sister starts dreaming too, filtering Alice's tale through her own slightly older, more grounded perspective.
And the Wonderland sounds transform. The white rabbit's rustling becomes grass.
Their teacups become sheep bells. The Queen shouts a shepherd boy. The mock turtle's sobs become lowing cattle.
It's like the magic fades into everyday reality, but something remains.
Precisely. This is a beautiful illustration of how stories leave an imprint. Even when the direct reading experience is over, the themes, the images, the feelings linger and shape how we perceive the world around us. The sister's dream shows the story integrating itself into her consciousness, coloring her reality.
So the book changes how she hears the farmyard sounds.
Yes, it's proof that reading isn't just a temporary escape. It can permanently alter our internal landscape, the lens through which we see everything else. The story becomes part of us.
And the very final image is the sister imagining Alice grown up.
Sharing stories with children, perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago. Making their eyes bright, finding pleasure in simple joys, remembering her own childhood.
That feels like the ultimate point about understanding books.
I think so too. It's not just about decoding text or analyzing themes, as important as those are. It's about the fundamental human connection through stories. Carrying them, sharing them, letting them link generations and enrich our lives.
It's about connection, memory, shared imagination.
Exactly. The true value lies in how books weave themselves into the fabric of our lives, offering wonder, reflection, and connection long after we finish reading. That's the deepest kind of understanding.
Wow. So Alice really does take us on a deep dive into reading itself. We've seen how it plays with our expectations, challenges logic, questions meaning and authority, and ultimately celebrates the power of imagination and shared stories.
It covers so much ground, all wrapped up in this seemingly whimsical tale.
So a final thought for you, our listener. The next time you open a book, maybe think beyond just the plot or the information. Consider how you're reading. What are your expectations? Are you finding meaning or maybe imposing it? Are you questioning the rules, the voice, the authority?
And maybe ask yourself, how might this story, this text linger? How might it subtly change the way you see or hear the world around you, long after you've turned the last page? How will this particular dive into the words transform your reality?